welcome back to This Is Not About Your Body. I am your host, Jessi Nealand, and today I'm doing a solo episode because I wanted to share about something that came up in last week's episode where I was interviewing Jill Coleman of Jill Fit, and we talked, like right towards the end of the episode, we talked a little bit about anti-aging and Botox. And she said, sort of posed the question of like, is it okay to be a person in the public eye who, is like promoting empowerment of women and like body acceptance and that kind of thing, and then also do stuff that might seem counterintuitive to that, like, anti-aging or, getting Botox or whatever kind of thing. I think she mentioned a few other things too, like spray tans and, whatever types of procedures that like are very specifically designed to help a person more closely conform to the beauty ideals that we have in our society. So I think this is a really important thing to clarify my stance on, and also just like talk about and share some personal stuff with you. So my first thing to say about this is I believe in absolute bodily autonomy for everybody. And that means basically like you can and should do whatever the hell you want with your body. It's your body. Nobody else gets to have an opinion on that, frankly. I don't think that there is any reason to judge how another person copes with the stress of living in an oppressive environment. And yes, like there is a certain amount of, how do I put it? Like sort of a responsibility to being in a public eye that I do believe probably upholds a better society. So for example, like the Kardashians or whoever like lies about the procedures they get, I do think that's really irresponsible, right? Like they're really, really public and they get these things done and then they lie about it. To me, yeah, that's not like a good decision. I understand it and they are allowed to absolutely do whatever they want. I will never judge anyone for doing the thing. But I will say that I feel a certain amount of, or rather, I guess I should say, I wish that people felt a little bit more responsibility to kind of owning up to whatever that is in the public eye, or even in the, maybe in the private eye. I don't know. Like, I'm not saying that everyone owes disclosure because they absolutely don't, but I do think there's a more nuanced conversation to have here. So bodily autonomy, 100% no nuance. Everyone gets to do whatever the hell they want to their bodies. And I believe without judgment or disrespect from others. For any reason they want, you're allowed to do what you want. But I do also feel that the more nuanced conversation here is, what then are we obligated to? What do we owe the world? And I don't think there's a 100% answer here for anyone. I do, however, think that there is a need to be more transparent in general so that people are not then walking around like with this impression that bodies can look the way that we're seeing bodies look or faces look so often. And that includes, a lot of like weight suppression stuff, people who get weight loss surgeries or do weight loss pills or, whatever other kind of procedures. And then we end up thinking, oh, everybody who is famous basically is able to stay so thin. Or maybe they're just like hiding disordered eating habits, or sometimes they're very public about disordered eating habits and they're like, this is what I do and you should do it too. So it's a complicated question there as to what we should be talking about and owning in a transparent way. But the doing of the thing, I will never judge. So that's the first thing I want to say about it. Like, get whatever you want done to your body when you want to, and that you're allowed to. I don't believe that it makes you necessarily like a bad feminist or even necessarily less body positive to do stuff from wearing mascara to contouring your whole entire face, to like getting your hair blown out, getting a spray tan, whatever it is. Like, I don't think that impacts or makes any kind of negative assessment on you. I just don't. Like, you're allowed to do what you want that makes you feel good. And if you live in a system of oppression, it's nobody else's business how you cope with that. So even if we're talking about like a person in a very large body who is dieting, I don't judge it. In fact, I don't judge anybody for dieting. I understand where that comes from because we live in a fat phobic society in which there are very real consequences to being in a bigger body, right? So the doing of the thing is absolutely fine. And I think people, particularly people with a public platform, I guess I wish for more thoughtfulness in how they talk about it. However, I also feel, obviously, given my work, body neutrality, I also feel that there is a big conversation to be had about where these decisions come from. Because, all these decisions are morally neutral. Just like all food, eating all foods is morally neutral, and doing whatever the heck you want for exercise or not exercise is morally neutral. Like body neutrality, it expands to all of this. You can't be body neutral, but like apply a moral judgment to something you do to your body. It really has to be all of it. So from a body neutral lens, I think you can look at these kinds of procedures or decisions and get more curious and actually have like a more interesting conversation than, oh, is it okay to do it or should I not do it? Because the question at that point really becomes, well, what's the motivation for doing it? Are you clear on that? And I would wish that everyone had the opportunity to get clear on it before doing it, because I think so often these decisions are made automatically. And that's something Jill was saying is like, when did you start dieting? She's like, I don't even know that I made a decision to do it, to look a certain way or whatever. It was just like something you sort of fell into at a certain age. It's like everyone's kind of doing it. It's just everywhere. And all of a sudden you're dieting before you even know it, So I think there's something to that kind of default. That automatic, obligatory decision-making that really bums me out and bothers me and gets me angry on behalf of the people who are being sort of ushered into this system where they don't have the opportunity to pause and be like, why am I doing this? Like, what am I trying to achieve here? What is this about? What's my underlying motive even? What is contouring my face get me? Or what am I hoping it gets me? Or what is it protecting me from? Or what am I hoping it protects me from? Like, the whole conversation that I have with clients around body neutrality is getting more clear about that stuff. Like, why do you want to look a certain way? What is the motivation? Often the subconscious motivation. And what kind of fantasy are you holding for yourself on the other side? Like, what are you hoping your life would be like if you had this, this appearance that you're wishing for? Because once you get clear on that, a lot more opportunities open up, because again, you're looking at it with a neutral lens. So you're like, oh, that's interesting. It makes sense that I would want, to like be more popular among my peers in middle school or high school or whatever, or to get a great job and land a great partner. If that's your impression later, like in your 20s, you're like, oh, that's what'll get me the things I want in life. If it'll keep me safe or protect me from humiliation or rejection or abandonment, like it makes total sense you would want those things, right? But once you get clear on what is underneath it, you have the opportunity to challenge that and then go after what you're really wanting more directly and more effectively. And that's the gift of body neutrality. Body neutrality gives you this opportunity, this incredible opportunity to be like, oh, I see what's going on there, and I don't judge myself for it because, neutrality. But I am now able to consider what I really want to do moving forward. And maybe that means I do sort of wish I were thinner, but I'm not going to diet and hurt myself anymore, right? Like I'm not going to like push myself past the point of where I need to be taking a break and resting. I'm not going to underfeed myself or restrict myself because that's bad for my mental health. So I'm just going to not do those things anymore. And I can be conscious about it. And even though that might be uncomfortable because I'm like, I still sort of prefer to be in a smaller body, whatever, like that is a thing that opens up when you're able to be neutral and informed about the whole process of what's going on and where these decisions or these choices are coming from. So likewise, from that place, you could totally say like, I decide consciously to wear a full head to toe contour, like do all the things that make me closer to conventional beauty ideals and like get the surgeries and the Botox and everything because I want to be as conventionally attractive as possible, but I'm doing it mindfully. You could. From that place, you absolutely could, I think, be body neutral and make the decision to fit into a culture a particular way, send a particular message so that you can get certain things that you're aware that these looks can get you. and be okay, because they won't necessarily, at that point, they can't be attached to your worth, right? Because you've done the work to unpack these layers. You've done the work of body neutrality to say, I'm doing this because I know, let's say you work in Hollywood or you're a model or something like that. I know that I have to maintain a certain aesthetic in order to get the work that I want. Jamila Jamil talks about this sometimes, where she's like, in order to continue booking, I have to stay relevant, which means I have to wear like certain kind of fashion-y type things, modern fashionable clothing to certain events. I have to show up looking a certain way. So she is a great example of someone who I would say does this from a lens of body neutrality. She's like, this does not make me better. I am not a more worthy person. There is no judgment attached to the fact that I'm all contoured and done up and wearing this like, super expensive fashion outfit that had to be like tailored to her body and all of that. Like, it doesn't make her better or worse. None of it does. And she is open about that. The fact that she can make these decisions, but not because she's hoping that you don't know what she really looks like, because she'll still share that too, or not because she's trying to trick anybody, or not because she's trying to earn her belonging or worthiness or anything like that. She's just literally like, this is what books me work, so I do it. And that is body neutrality, right? Like, it does not matter what the actual behaviors are or the actual choices are. That's not what determines it being body neutral or not. All decisions are morally neutral. All decisions can be body neutral. It just depends on where it's coming from in you, because you could also do something super, seemingly like inoffensive. I don't know, like wearing, like a lip balm or something, and have that come from a not body neutral place, right? Like, it could be something that comes from a place of insecurity or feeling like I'm unworthy and I have to fix this flaw about myself in order to be deserving of anything good in the world. Like, it doesn't matter what the choices that we're talking about. It matters where it's coming from. When we're talking about, is it or isn't it like body neutral or sort of mentally healthy? So with that in mind, I think it can be absolutely body neutral to do any of the things that we are talking about here. Now, I do think there's probably a certain, like a tipping point at some point. There may be a tipping point where it's going against health, and so at that point, I don't know, maybe it gets a little complicated or hairy, but I still stand by this. If a person made a truly body neutral decision around like tanking their health for the sake of something else they wanted, I think that's okay too, right? Like, it ultimately it goes back to bodily autonomy, and it goes back to what their motivation is. I can't think of an example right now where it would be like maybe someone chooses their career over their health. That's actually probably a pretty good example. Again, maybe it's a celebrity who's doing like a 3-month intense training that like kind of crushes their body, but is like for this kick-ass movie. I mean, that would be a pretty good example of, we're not saying that this is necessarily like good for them, but we are saying, okay, if they came from a place of making this decision mindfully, truly conscious of the trade they were making and the fact that that trade was worth it to them, and also truly conscious of the fact that doing what they were doing or making these changes to their body did not actually make them better, morally superior, more worthy, or more deserving of good things, it could be body neutral. So that is my stance on those things. And with that in mind, I want to be super transparent with you all here and talk about my own personal approach and procedures. So I've talked before about getting filler in my lips. It was like a year ago, and it was actually a really kind of negative experience for me. I had sort of just dived into it. I was like, I'm just gonna do a thing. It sounds fun. It sounds like I had like seen all these beautiful, images, and I was like, oh, that sounds dope, right? Like super cushy lips. I just think that would be fun. So I made this decision. They puffed up so bad. So my first like week and a half was really swollen and really bruised, which was my bad. I didn't know you weren't supposed to take the anti-inflammatory stuff. I took like ibuprofen right beforehand, and so they bruised up and they puffed up so bad. It was not normal. It was not a normal way of experiencing the recovery for that, but I had no idea there was any recovery. Like, in my head, it was going to be so easy. It was really painful, and it was not an easy recovery. I had bruising, not just my lips. It was like all the way around my mouth. It was embarrassing. It was stressful. And there's just a really, really uncomfortable cognitive thing that happened where I would look at myself in the mirror and like not see myself. You spend so long looking at your face and then your face is suddenly different. It was very uncomfortable for me and I did not like it. So filler lasts theoretically like a year, but I think there's still some in there. When I look in the mirror now, I'm like fine with it. I'm very comfortable with it. Probably like 6 months into it, I went, yeah, this is okay. I like this. This is nice. But it took me like weeks just to get from I made a huge mistake, I don't like this at all, I don't like how it looks on me, to comfortable and like, okay, I made a decision and it's kind of cool sometimes and it's kind of weird sometimes and it's all fine. But it wasn't ever about becoming more attractive. So I was really confused by the experience of like feeling less attractive. That was a very weird thing to have to like grapple with. I was like, oh, I didn't mean to do that, like I just thought it would be like neat to see my face look different. Like that's kind of the person I am. I'm like very curious. I do very little research about stuff. I just show up and make whimsical decisions. This is who I am. It's who I've always been. I did it that day and like I dealt with the consequences. So with that in mind, I think you can still probably see in me now some lip filler, although I think it looks much, much closer to how it was before I got it done, because a lot of it has sort of like faded, metabolized. I don't know, whatever happens to it. So to be super transparent, something I've wanted to talk about is that I also got Botox. And this was a few months ago, like 3 months ago. I got Botox for the very first time. And again, this was something that I had been like, oh, at some point I totally want to try that. But it wasn't about being more attractive. In fact, for me, one of the big appeals was, there were several. I read a whole bunch of really incredible research about Botox. One of them was headaches. There's like just a really decent pile of research showing that it decreases headaches to get Botox, especially because they can put it in the occipital something or others, like the little spots in the back of the neck. As well as like the forehead and the sort of like hairline and where you hold tension in your face, that getting Botox can, cause like that sort of forced, because Botox just paralyzes the muscles. Basically, it like forces them to relax. It doesn't paralyze them in a way that it's like they're tense, right? It keeps them from contracting, so then they just relax. So anything that's like hyper tight, habitually tight, it sort of has this really neat opportunity to like relax for the first time. So that was what first attracted me to it. And then as I started looking into some of the research, I was just blown away by how much cool stuff Botox can do, including there's not a ton of research on this yet, but some of the sort of preliminary research is showing that it can impact depression because of the way that our body language, including our facial expressions, impacts our like chemical makeup, like how our brains make hormones and chemicals and stuff, and then vice versa, right? So these things go back and forth. A great example of this would be like you're feeling blah, so you kind of slump down. That's one direction. But also if you slump down, you start to feel a little more blah. So like there is a constant conversation between our body language and how we feel because of the chemical stuff going on in our brains. And with Botox, you're interrupting that in a really, mechanical way. Basically, you're like, okay, face, you're not going to make the same facial expressions that you always make. You're going to make a different kind of facial expression, one that is more relaxed because you put something in your face that makes them have to relax. But for somebody who is chronically depressed or angry, there are certain faces that we constantly make. So I've been depressed over the last couple of years. So there's a lot of scowling, which in fairness, I've actually always scowled. Like literally as a baby, I'm scowling and I have the exact same line in between my eyebrows. But like that scowling certainly gets turned up when I'm down. When I'm feeling low, I get irritable and I get, I just hold a lot more tension in my face. Like my default face has probably always been a bit scowly, but I think being depressed, it got a lot more scowly. And by that, I just mean there's like more of a tight-knit tension in my forehead. And I even discovered, I don't know that Botox can ever fix this, but there's like a sneer that I get. Like I get kind of like a mean face. So, we talk about resting bitch face or whatever. I have I have that, but also like that makes me feel worse, right? Because, there's all this research showing that if you smile, even if you're fake smiling, you can actually improve your mood. Well, the same goes the other direction. If you're always scowling or frowning or, whatever, making these sort of negative cued up faces that we've like learned to connect to certain chemicals in the brain, then you will feel worse. You will feel more negative. So some of the research is showing if you interrupt that shit with something like Botox or any of the other neurotoxins, you can actually get some relief from the depression or the other negative like feelings that you would get from this feedback loop. You're interrupting the feedback loop, which is incredible. I mean, I just geeked out so hard. I read like study after study, article after article. I was like, this is incredible. It also can stop because it paralyzes the sweat glands. Sweat glands? Yeah, I think that's right. You can get neurotoxins like Botox in your armpits or your palms of your hand or anywhere else that your hairline if you get really, really sweaty. So people with hyperhidrosis, I think it's called, really intensive excess sweating, they can basically be cured, right? Like for months at a time by getting a paralysis of those sweat glands that are in overdrive. I mean, this is just incredible, right? And it's just blowing my mind. I'm reading all this research and then I'm starting to think, okay, it would be so neat to experience all of this like psychological effect for myself. I'm just so curious about this. I'm like, would I be less depressed? What would it feel like to not have resting bitch face automatically for the first time in my life, not to sit around scowling? And I got really intensive headaches, especially while writing the book because I'm staring at my computer for 12 hours a day and then staring at my phone for the rest of it. So it was just this like really, really stressful time, stressful on my eyes. I had some like ocular stuff going on, ocular migraine kind of stuff. And then stressful just because like I can't even describe, if you don't get this, it won't make sense. But it's like my scalp would hurt, like I would just feel tension everywhere. And I was like, I think that would be really cool to just see what it felt like for that to relax. And then I'm also really curious, what would the impact on my mood be? Now, here's the other piece of it that I thought was fascinating. Not necessarily a good thing, just a really interesting thing. When you can't mirror other people's expressions, facial expressions, because of the fact that mirroring is something we do automatically, like if somebody else is feeling something and we are sitting there listening to them, we automatically mirror what we are sort of seeing. This is all happening subconsciously, but it's one of the ways that we connect with people. So it makes them feel heard and connected to. And this happens in our body language and posture as well as our facial expressions. And it makes you then understand what they're feeling, right? It's one of the ways that it's connective for both of us because they see it happen in us when we're mirroring them and they go, oh, okay, they get it. It feels really good for them. They feel very seen and understood. And then we understand what they're feeling in part because we're literally mirroring it in ourselves on like a small scale, so we're giving our brain the experience of what they're experiencing. And this is just an incredible fact about being people. I mean, I love this kind of stuff. I geek out so hard on it. But the interesting thing that I was reading is this can be a positive for some people. If like, let's say you are partnered with or living with a very depressed or very angry person, you might constantly be mirroring their tension. You might constantly be in a position of subconsciously taking on their feelings and sort of feeling them for yourself. Like an angry, scowly person who's like this all the time with a scrunched face, you might be doing more scrunching, more frowning, more whatever than you would normally do because of this human sort of automatic impulse to connect by mirroring. So if that was the case, then Botox would actually be really wonderful for you, right? It would be a very positive thing because you would get to have a little bit of distance from the other person's negative feelings. Could be really great. The other thing, though, is if that's not the case, it could have a really negative impact on your relationships because other people would feel less seen and heard by you because you weren't mirroring them, because you literally can't mirror them. Like the inability to fully to go through the entire, facial expression range makes it so that you can't perfectly mirror another person. And by perfectly, I just mean like to the, the fullest extent of your facial ability. So not being able to fully mirror them means that they're not going to feel quite as seen or heard or understood by you. Possibly. I mean, this is like, again, the research is like pretty new, but it makes total sense to me that this would be the case. So I read that and I was like, oh my God, what if I got Botox and then like my client or, my partner or whoever it felt less connected to me? That would be horrible. But also it only lasts like 2 to 3 months. So I was like, that's an experiment that I think sounds fascinating and I'm super curious what people would feel. But obviously that would be a negative, right? That would be a drawback. The more important thing I thought, well, not more important, just sort of equally important here as far as like potential drawbacks would be that I felt less empathetic. I felt less connected to people because, I'm a coach, right? So like I do a lot of work connecting with people. And what if, because I couldn't mirror what was going on with another person, I lost access to empathy? Because even if it were a small amount, that would be pretty bad. And likewise in my relationships, I already think it's kind of hard for me to be a super compassionate partner to my partner. It's hard for me to be particularly compassionate or empathetic when I'm struggling with my own stuff, especially. So I have like a little bit of a reputation in my partnership of just not being kind, not being empathetic, not being compassionate, which sucks. And I'm working on it. And it's totally unrelated to this. But I was like, what if this made it worse? Like what if I disconnected from my feelings of connection to my partner because I couldn't make the right facial expressions, to like feel the right feeling? Or what if he felt disconnected because I wasn't mirroring and he just felt something was wrong, So with all of this in mind, I just think it's just unbelievably interesting. And I'm a person who is all about interesting experiences. I think that I say this sometimes in my writing, like I don't feel like I was put on earth to be happy. I'm not sure that I even value happiness, but I am super like, I feel connected to curiosity. I am put on earth to be interested and do interesting things and think interesting thoughts. So this is where I'm like, okay, I have to try this. So I go, I get it done. And honestly, like, it was really not a big deal. I think compared to the big fiasco of the lips, I was kind of like surprised that it didn't feel like a big deal. It didn't hurt, didn't take long. There was no recovery, it was just like whatever. And then over the next couple of days, you have to wait like a week for it to kick in. And I actually got something called Dysport, not Botox, because they're basically the same thing, but this was on sale. So I did the special and I got the Dysport and so it took like maybe 4 to 5 days, I think, to like kick in, meaning for days I kept looking in the mirror and nothing was different. And I was like, this is like very anticlimactic. And again, compared to the lips. But when it finally kicked in, I was like, oh, this is so crazy. Like what a bizarre experience, I'm like trying to knit my eyebrows and they're not knitting, and I'm trying to like raise my eyebrows and they're not raising. It was very weird. I mean, I had specifically gone in there and told them what I wanted to do. So I'd gotten the ones in the occipital at the back of the neck. I had gotten them in like basically like for the tension up here and for migraines by the hairline. And then the whatever you call in between the brows. I think they're called 11s, but mine didn't look like 11s. It was whatever. So it was all of that. And then I think maybe on the outside by the tail of the eyebrows as well. So whatever, I basically told them, do what you think makes sense for me to like experience relief, And as it kicked in, I thought it was super weird. I was like sending photos to my best friend being like, I can't scowl. Like I literally can't scowl no matter how hard I try. I look like an idiot trying to scowl. And it was just a bizarre experience of like over the next couple of weeks being like, there's certain faces that like I think I'm making, in my head, I'm like sort of making, but aren't happening physically, which was really weird. I didn't get much feedback about, I should say I didn't experience much feedback. Personally, I didn't feel any changes to my own connection with other people, but I asked, and my best friend, my partner, and I feel like I asked someone else who gave me this feedback, basically the feeling that they were like maybe feeling a little less connected to me, that it was minor, but they were like, yeah, I guess maybe that's true. And it was sort of over time, it was like, hey, do you think you've noticed feeling less connected to me over the last month? and my partner was like, I guess maybe it just feels like you're not listening as much. And I was like, oh, totally, right? Because like my listening face is moving less, because I could still move stuff. It just wasn't the same amount that I normally would. And so, my partner's used to me scowling along as I listened to him talk about something, and I wasn't doing that. He also, though, said that I seemed happier and more relaxed, and I felt that too. So it was a weird trade-off, right? Because I'm like, well, maybe you feel slightly less connected, but overall, like, does it make our relationship better for me to be a little bit more buoyant, a little bit like feeling a little lighter? Because the thing that I remember once it kicked in was extreme relief. Like relief from a tension that I have probably been carrying my entire life. And the big thing, I think, is the scowliness, but also whatever else. I'm not sure what was being held, but it was literally like I felt a relaxation, relief feeling that it was magical. Like it was blissful. It was incredible. It's like, when you catch yourself like crunched up and you're like, okay, relax. And then you're like, okay, I can relax just a little bit. It was like, popping a balloon, and it just went, like all that tension was just gone. And it was incredible for maybe like a month and a half, maybe. It really didn't last that long ultimately, before, it started to sort of like balance back out again. And yeah, so what I was feeling was lighter, like emotionally lighter. And it was kind of an interesting thing to think about the trade-off between I'm emotionally lighter, but my partner feels like I'm not listening as much, like which is better here? But for me, I mean, oh my God, landslide, like win. It was incredible. So I went back yesterday and I got it done. So it hasn't kicked in. So everything's like very normal still on my face today. But it's the kind of thing that I'm like, I would maybe keep doing it forever, but I'm also hoping that like if I do it for a while, the patterns in my facial tension will change, because it's chronic patterns that keep us stuck in these certain tensions, just like having your shoulders up to your ears. I was like, can I like get Botox in my shoulders? And she was like, I mean, it would take so much product, and like I don't know that that's a good idea because you still, whatever. There's all this cool stuff that you can actually like use Botox to inhibit chronic muscle tension during rehab, which makes total sense. But just to do it on its own obviously doesn't make sense because the tension is just going to come back, So I'm sort of thinking of this a little bit as an experiment too, where I'm like teaching my face to relax. I am teaching hopefully my whole self to relax again. I'm really using this as a tool in my toolbox for fighting depression and tension and fear and all the things that like keep me tight, because I want to access that softness. I want that relief, and I want it to come naturally. But I mean, I'm happy to use whatever the heck tools exist, right? And this is a very cool one right now. Regarding attractiveness, I would say I also was shocked because, again, with the lip thing, I was like, I would do this even if it made me look less attractive because of the relief it offers, but it was super pretty. I really enjoyed sort of a weird look, not being able to like make all the facial expressions the same way, but it felt super pretty to me because it like does something to the skin. I guess probably because it something about like it makes your pores smaller, like freezes the sweat glands, oil glands. I don't know what it is, but it made my skin look super dewy and like really, really beautiful. So I thought that was kind of a cool perk since that wasn't what I was going in for. And I really don't mind. I don't have any like complaints about the lines on my face. So it was interesting to see my face with less lines, I guess, but it wasn't like, oh man, this really bothers me and I want to change it. So with all that in mind, I wanted to be really transparent about this experience so that if you look at my face and you're like, wow, Jessi just turned 36 and they have no crow's feet or whatever. Like, I don't want anybody looking at me and being like, this is what 36 should look like, because I mean, everybody's different, but I believe so strongly in transparency being one of those things we can do to be responsible and make the world a better place, right? Like, do what you want, but don't try to convince anybody that this is just like what you look like and they should use like olive oil on their skin to get the same results, right? Like, I'm not into trickery. So here's the transparent version of my story. But also because I think it just, it's one of those bizarre experiments that I'm like, I will try whatever forever, right? Like, I'm just going to keep trying shit. I am not going to worry about how any of this like feels to anybody else, because I know my intention comes from a body neutral place. Like, it feels fun to me to experiment in these ways. And it feels interesting to me to get to play around with stuff like this. And, I have the money to do it, and so I'm going to do it. This is like a cool way for me to play. I like it, and it does not come from a place of, oh, if I get Botox and I don't have wrinkles, I'm going to be more worthy. I'm going to be deserving of more care, more love, or more sex, or more anything, right? Because doing the work to access body neutrality really opens up all of this space to play. And I don't mean to say that your way of playing will be anything like mine. I know everybody's so different, and a lot of people are like very, sacred about their faces, and I just don't feel that way. I'm like, yeah, I'll try whatever. I love the idea of exploring like a more androgynous face, for example. Something I am really curious about is having a more angular look, because I identify as non-binary, but I don't read that way. I read as very soft and feminine. And since, there's certain things I won't do, and then there's other things I will. And I'm like, this all comes from a really playful, joyful, curious place of like, I probably won't get a breast reduction or, get my breasts taken off for many reasons that like have nothing to do with judgment of that decision. I actually think it's like a super cool decision for the people who do it. And sometimes I'm a little bit jealous. I'm like, oh, I kind of wish I could do that. But I also feel so much connection to pleasure in my breasts. And I just, that doesn't feel like the direction that I would want to go to explore androgyny. But I wear binders, and that feels like a really good step for me. But the androgyny of my face is something I'm like a lot more willing to just say, screw it. Let's try some stuff. Let's play. So there's all these things that I think can be done joyfully. And I always use Dolly Parton as the example. I don't remember her exact quote, but she talks about like how all of her decisions, I mean, Dolly is not natural, right? Like not any inch of Dolly is natural at this point, but she's so joyful about it. She's like, if you have the money and want to do it and it makes you happy, just do it. Like that's her whole thing. And it really feels to me like Dolly didn't look in the mirror and say, oh God, this is gross. I need to change this. It feels like she looked in the mirror and went, it'd be dope as hell. Like tits the size of the Eiffel Tower. I just think that, I mean, I can't say whether or not Dolly Parton is body neutral. I haven't got a clue. But it feels to me like it comes from this really playful and joyful and sort of exploratory, curious place. And to me, that is body neutrality, right? Like you get to play in how you express yourself and what the decisions you make within your sense of values, your sense of pleasure and play, your sense of self-expression. All of this stuff is so individual. So to ever judge the actual decision makes no sense to me for, as you can tell, a whole bunch of reasons. But my true wish for everyone is that they can come to any decisions they make from a place of body neutrality and knowing that they are worthy as they are. They are not, there are no morally superior or inferior ways to look, and there are no morally inferior or superior decisions to make about your body. If somebody gets Botox because they feel self-conscious because they live in a world full of these, youth-obsessed beauty ideals, that just sucks for them. Like, I understand it. I completely understand it. But it speaks to pain that they're holding. And I just wish for them to have the ability to unpack whatever needs to be unpacked so that they cannot have to hold that pain for themselves or that shame. I wish for everyone to feel free to make these decisions from a place that is genuine instead of a place that is obligatory or painful or shamey. And that's it. Like, I know that's not going to be everyone, and I still won't judge anyone for doing literally anything. But my wish, like the thing that hurts me is the thought of these decisions being made by somebody who says, I'm disgusting and I need to change it. Or I am unworthy of love unless I change it. Or, unless I maintain a certain aesthetic, my partner's going to leave me. Like there's a lot of sticky, mucky horribleness that these decisions tend to come from or be linked to. And that is the big shame to me. Like that is the big pain point around this stuff. So if we want to have a conversation, I don't want it to be about should you or shouldn't you, or should any individual ever do anything with their body or their face. That's not the conversation that makes sense to be having. The conversation should be about what are the factors that are making entire generations of people, especially women, feel obligated to make these decisions and feel so bad about themselves that they feel like the only way to be worthy of taking up space in the world or be worthy of respect or be worthy of belonging or love or care or kindness is to be different than how they are. So I am not in the camp of natural is better. Everybody should age naturally. You should do whatever you want, but please consider where these decisions come from in yourself. And to the best of anyone's ability, I realize this stuff is so hard. It's obviously the work that I do. This is so much easier said than done. But to the best of your ability, to consider how you can get to a place of making that decision without shame, without a story attached that one is better and one is worse, without moral judgment, without insecurity or fear. So that's my whole spiel on this. Okay, this ended up being a really long solo episode, but I wanted to unpack it. I wanted to share it. I'm really curious what y'all think about this because I think it's kind of a loaded topic. I would not be surprised at all if I got some haters being like, how dare you do this thing? You're supposed to be upholding the natural aging, whatever. I get it. I don't believe it. It won't bother me. You're allowed to feel that way if you feel that way. But I am just curious what comes up for you after listening to this whole conversation, what this conversation brings up for you. Because I think it's a really important one. And since I just turned 36, I feel like I'm, sort of heading into the stage of maybe talking more and more about aging because it's going to be more and more relevant, right? So yeah. I would love if you are listening to this and want to just share your thoughts, come over to Instagram at Jessi Kneeland, shoot me a DM or go to my website, jessikneeland.com and go over to the contact form and leave me your thoughts because I'm really curious. I think this is a fascinating topic, obviously, and I'm all about having all of the opinions and perspectives on it because I just think we would be all so much better if we were more open about this kind of thing. And it's so relevant to body neutrality to be able to say there is no right or wrong decision for how you do anything. There is only interesting, nuanced, and radically honest conversations that can be had around that. So that's it. Thank you for listening. I just want to remind you that you can go over to my website and there is merch available for you if you want to support me or rep my brand or just rep Body Neutrality. There's t-shirt designs that have all been created by my lovely partner, Drew Hughes. So go on over there to the shop page. There's some self-study programs as well. Including my newest ebook called Sustainable Movement, a Body Neutral Guide to Health and Fitness, which is 103 pages of content about how you can actually cultivate a truly healthy, sustainable, and positive relationship to movement and not let the desire to get healthier or be fitter tank your mental health or your body image. So you can check that out. That's all on my shop page. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. I am happy to have you here. And I will catch you next time.